We sit in a comfortable meditation posture and close the eyes. We'll put our attention on the silence that's always there deep in the mind. Connect with that silence and become the silence. You are the silence. You are the silent witness. Now listen to the Yoga Vashishta from the perspective of the silent witness. Book 4, Chapter 44, continuing with verse 30. However, there are some unconscious beings who, in spite of their attainment of this knowledge, after passing into 100 lives in it in various shapes, are so perverted in their nature that they have to return again to this earth. Some, after having attained higher states, fall down again by the lowness of their spirits and appear in the shapes of brute creatures, and at last have to fall into hell. There are some great-minded souls who, having proceeded from the state of Brahma, have to pass here a single life, after which they are absorbed in the Supreme Soul. There are multitudes of living beings in other worlds also, some of whom have become like the lotus-born Brahma, and others as Shiva. There are others who have become like the gods or brute creatures in them, and there are snakes and other reptiles also in them, as well as in this earth. There are other worlds as obvious to view as this earth, and there are many such worlds that have gone by, and others are yet to appear. In the other worlds, there are various other creatures of different shapes, produced by various unknown causes, and which have their growths and deaths like those of this earth. Some are produced as Gandharvas, and others as Yakshas. Some are generated as Sura demigods, and some others as Asura and Daitya gods. The manners and modes of life of the people in all parts of the globe are like those of men living in this part of the earth. All creatures move according to their own natures and mutual relations forevermore, like the waves and currents of a river, move forward, following and followed by others in regular succession. The entire creation moves onward in an eternal progression in its course of evolution and involution, and in its motions of ascent and descent, like the waves of the ocean. In this manner, multitudes of living beings, with consciousness of their self-existence, proceed from the Supreme Spirit, rising from and at last falling into it. All created beings are detached from their source, like light from the lamp and solar rays from the sun. They are like sparks of red-hot iron and the flashing sparks of fire. They are like the minute moments of time and the flying odors of flowers, or the cold icicles and particles of rainwater, carried by breeze and cooling the air all around. the flitting particles of life, flying from one spot to another and filling different bodies with animation, are at last absorbed in the mainspring of vitality from where they had risen. Particles of vital air being thus spread out and scattered over the universe come to assume the various forms of animated being in all the world, but they are all mere creations of our ignorance. In reality, they are like the rolling waves of water in the vast ocean of eternity. Chapter 44. Description of Brahma's self-birth. Rama asks, how do I understand how particles of the divine spirit take the form of living souls, but I cannot conceive how it assumes the physical body composed of bones and ribs? Vasishtha replied, why don't you know it, Ram, when I have explained it to you before? Or have you lost your deductive reasoning of arriving at the conclusion from these promises? All these physical bodies in the world, and all these moving and unmoving persons and things, are only false representations, rising before us like the visions in our dreams. The phenomenal world differs from dreams only in it being a longer and more delusive. It is like the optical illusion of seeing a double moon or seeing a mountain in the delusion of darkness. The enlightened mind, cleared of its drowsiness of ignorance and freed from the chains of its desire, views the world to be no more than a dream. The world is a creation naturally conceived in the imagination of all living souls. The world remains impressed upon the soul until the soul attains its final liberation. The fleeting essence of the soul is like the whirling current of waters, or like the germ of a seed, or more like the leaflet of a sprout. As the flower is contained in the branch and the fruit within its flowers, so this creation of the imagination is contained in the receptacle of the mind. As the ever-changing form of the chameleon exhibits only a partial color at a time, so the ever-varying mind shows only the form that is prominent in its thought for the time being. The same thought assumes a visible form, like clay taking the form of a pot. Good thoughts and actions of the prior state of life serve to give the soul a good form in its next birth on earth. We see the mighty lotus-born Brahma situated in the bud of that flower and find it to be the effect of the good thoughts he had in his mind. This unlimited creation is the false fabrication of imagination from which the living soul, in conjunction with the mind, obtains the state of Virinchi, Brahma the Creator. Rama said, Sage, I need to be fully informed whether all beings sprang from the same cause as Brahma, the lotus-born. Vasishtha answered, Let me tell you again, O long-armed Rama, how Brahma has a body. From this example, you will learn about the existence of the world. The Supreme Soul, which is unlimited by time or space of its own will and by the power of his omnipotence, takes the limited form of time and space upon itself. The same becomes the living soul and is filled with various desires in itself of becoming many. When this limited power, which is Brahma, thinks on the state of his having been the cosmic egg, Hiranyagarbha, in his former state of existence in the prior kalpa, he is immediately transformed to that state, which is in his mind, and which is ever busy with its thoughts and imaginations. First, it thinks of the clear sky, the receptacle of sound, which is perceptible by the auditory organs. This thought, being condensed in the mind, makes it vibrate like the wind does the air. Then it thinks about the vibrations of air, which are the objects of feeling through the porous skin and the mind. It is moved by the thoughts of air and wind to assume that form which is invisible to the naked eye. The condensation of the elements of air and wind together produce the idea of light, which is the cause of sight, and which has colors and forms for its objects. Thus the mind, moved by its triple thoughts of air, wind, and light, produces the property of fire. These immediately join to produce the idea of coldness, the property of water. Then the mind forms the ideas of the four elements: air, wind, fire, and water. These united together produce the gross forms of earth, the receptacle of scent. Then the mind, filled with its thoughts of these minute elementary particles, forsook its fine form of the spirit for its gross body of the five elements, the fifth being ether or akash. The mind saw this body shining like a spark of fire in the sky, which joined with its sense of self, ego, and understanding, formed its personality. This is called the spiritual body within the eightfold embodiment. Earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect, and ego. The spiritual body is situated like a bee in the middle of a lotus-like heart. It gives growth to the outer body by its inner working. It is thickened by the action and internal heating process of the heart, like the bell fruit or wood apple. The outer body receives the qualities of the inner mind, just as a jewel shines with the luster of the little particle of gold melted and infused within. The quality of the inner soul or mind manifests itself in the outer body in the same way as the quality of a seed appears in the form and taste of its fruit. Then the mind dwells upon the thoughts of its actions, which are expressed in the different organs and actions of the body, all produced by the motions of inner thoughts and acts, just like tree leaves and branches are projected by the inner process and operations of the seed. Its thoughts of up and down lift and lower its head and feet upward and down. Its thoughts of both sides extend its two arms to the right and left. Its thoughts of backward and forward place its back behind and its breast and belly before. The hairs on the head and fingers of the hands are like the filaments and twigs of trees. In this manner did Brahma, who is called a Muni and a mental being, because his body sprung from his mind, produced the different parts of his body according to his thoughts of their usefulness to turn him. He brought the body and its limbs to compactness, just as the seasons bring their fruits and grains to perfection. Thus, everything is perfected in time, and all beings have their beautiful bodies and figures. He, Lord Brahma, was the progenitor of all beings, filled with the qualities of strength and understanding, activity, dignity, and knowledge. Being begotten by the empty Brahman, he resides in the lap of emptiness. He is of the form of melted gold, like every other luminous body in the heavens. Though situated in the Supreme, yet the mind of Brahma is liable to the mistakes of his own making. And at times it quite forgets having no beginning, middle, or end, like his source. Sometimes the Lord thinks he is identical with the waters that existed in his mind before creation. At another, as the cosmic egg, which was as bright as the fire of universal destruction. Sometimes the Lord thinks he is in the dark forest that covered the earth before creation of living animals, and then as a lotus bed. Afterward, he became many forms at each phase and epoch of creation. Thus, Brahma became the preserver of many kinds of being, which he created of his own will from his mind at each stage or kalpa period. Of these beings, Brahma was the first that issued from Brahman himself. When Brahma was first begotten, he remained in his happy state of unconsciousness and forgetfulness. But being delivered from his mental inactivity in the womb, he came to see the light. He took a physical body with its breathings and respirations. It was covered with the pores of hair and furnished with gums and 32 teeth. He had 3 pots of shin bones, thighs, and backbone, standing on feet below, with the 5 airs, 5 partitions, 9 cavities, and a smooth skin covering all the limbs. It is accompanied by twice 10 fingers and their nails, and with a couple of arms and palms, and 2 or more hands and eyes. The body is the nest of the bird of the mind, and it is the hole of the snake of lust. It is the cave of the goblin of greediness, and the den of the lion of life. It is a chain at the feet of the elephant of pride, and it is a lake of the lotuses of our desire. Lord Brahma looked upon his handsome body and saw that it was good. Then the Lord thought to himself, from his view of the 3 times of the past, present, and future, and from his sight of the vault of heaven with a dark mist, like a swarm of flying locusts. What is this boundless space? What had it been before? How did I come to being? Thus, pondering in himself, he was enlightened in his soul. He saw in his mind the different past creations and recollected the various religions and their various sects which had grown up upon earth one after the other. He produced the holy Vedas as spring does its flower. He formed with ease all varieties of creatures from their archetypes in his mind. He set them in their various laws and customs for their temporal and spiritual welfare, as he saw them in the city of his mind. From their prototypes, in his eternal mind, Brahma thought upon the innumerable varieties of scriptures which had existed before, and all of which came to exist upon the earth in their visible forms, like flowers springing from the womb of the spring season. Thus, O Ram, did Brahma take upon himself in the form of the lotus-born and create his activity all the different creatures of the models of them that existed in his mind and which took their various forms in the visible world as well. Now we continue, established as the silent wit, and balance all the karmic traces that have been activated by this reading of the Yoga Vashishta, using the technique of Trimana Sanyama on the esoteric Mahamantra. Jai Gurudev.